All right, we are recording, John. You can take it away.
All right. Okay, well, thank you everyone who is here for making the time. We really, really appreciate it. Um, just for reference, this is the behavioral health investments, and I just realized I kept the T on there, and I should not have kept the T on there. My apologies. We are the behavioral health investments team. Uh, this is a technical assistance training for the invoicing process for all of our HB5024 partners. So today we're going to go through uh, just kind of a brief overview of the process, cover the invoice types that are within that process. We'll cover payment timelines, do a quick overview of what the invoice form looks like, and then we'll do a walkthrough of the actual form itself just so we can kind of see the process step by step. First things first, though, we'll do some quick introductions. My name's John Carpenter. I'm the team's loan specialist and housing investments coordinator. I'm also the project lead for HB5024. So essentially your main point of contact for grant administration purposes. And I'd like to introduce Blanca Barocio. Blanca, you're muted.
Thank you, John, for that introduction. My name is Blanca Barocio. I'm the program lead. Um, and I'm here for any additional support that John may need or any questions that you all may have. Take it away, Leila.
Hi, everyone. I'm Layla Ortega. You'll see me on some email correspondence probably. I support the shared inboxes. My pronouns are she, her, hers.
Thank you, Layla. And not in attendance today, but also part of the support team on this is Vesna Hopkins. She's a operations and policy analyst. She's usually the first point of review for the invoicing process. So you may hear from her before you hear from me if there's anything that has to do with your invoices when you send them in. And let's kick it off. So like I said, this is a technical assistance training to kind of go through the HB5024 invoicing process. The monthly invoicing form allows partners to submit expenses for reimbursement on a monthly basis, so you can receive your 5024 funding for completed work on your project. Reimbursements are set on a 45-day pay cycle. So what that means is you should expect to receive reimbursement for a submitted invoice form no later than 45 days after submitting. Um, there are a few reasons why that 45 days may be extended. Usually it's due to um, something getting caught in review when it comes to looking at the invoice form. If there is an issue, if we need further information, or if something is just missing, that's why that timeline can be extended. Um, Positive note, though, we do typically come in well under those 45 days. I believe right now we are averaging about 20 days. So just something to be aware of. 45 days is our target, but we are usually going much faster than that. One thing to note, the initial property acquisition invoicing form, which we will cover as part of this, should be submitted prior to closing on a property if that is part of your program. If you are purchasing a property with the grant dollars, we need that acquisition invoicing form prior to the property closing at title. That's so we can ensure that our team has enough time to get the funding taken care of because there's a whole wire approval process that we have to go through. So we ask that you give us as much notice as possible, preferably 45 days or so. Um, that way we can, like I said, go through the whole process because we have several teams we have to coordinate with to make sure that wire gets to where it needs to go. And we ask that you, like I said, give us notice and then get the form to us at least 15 days prior to closing date. And finally, we request that invoices or expense documentation be provided for each cost included in the invoice form. We ask that you include invoices in one package per budget category. That means if you have multiple invoices for renovation, one document package. So try not to break them up into multiple emails. Or if you have, multiple invoices for, say, landscaping or site work, again, one email, not multiple emails. And if you have any receipts or invoices that need to be scanned, we ask that we get one receipt per scanned page. Makes it a lot easier for us to process if we don't have multiple receipts from multiple vendors on one page. Okay, so first we're going to go over our invoice types. Within the invoice form, you have two types of invoices that can be selected for use under the HB5024 grant program. Oh, think I hear a baby. Invoice type can be selected using the drop-down on tab 1. The main differences are going to be highlighted in the next two slides, but the monthly invoice is what should be used for all expenditures that are not directly related to the acquisition or closing of the property. The expenditures included in the invoice should align with the month that the cost was incurred. So if a plumber came out and did work all of January 2025, we'd like to see all of those costs included on the January 2025 reimbursement form. Similarly, if you had somebody come out and do work in, say, November 2024, when you submit a reimbursement form, we ask that all those invoices be for the month of November 2024 and that the form be for November 2024, which I will get into how to make it look like that. As I said, we have up to 45 days to disperse payment from the date of receipt. And your property and acquisition and closing invoices are going to be submitted as reimbursement invoices, even though they're not technically being reimbursed. And like I said, the payment timeline for acquisition is about 30 to 45 days, but it is dependent on the purchase agreement terms. So there's potential for it to be expedited. But again, we like to get as much heads up as we possibly can. The second type of invoice types are going to be advance payments or an advance payment request. The advance payment request should be used for work that requires significant upfront deposits to get started or materials ordered. Examples off the top of my head would be if there's cabinet work that's being done and the vendor requires a 50% deposit up front to get started, that's a good reason for an advance request. If framing is getting started on the actual building itself and the lumber company needs a significant deposit to get materials delivered, that's a reason for an advance payment request. Advance payment requests are approved on a case-by-case basis, and they can only be requested quarterly. Quarterly as in for the quarter that the funds will be spent. And we only allow one advance payment request approved at a time. So what that essentially means is, let's say you submit a advance payment request for Q3 2025, which is this quarter that we're in now. It's Q3 2025 because we use a fiscal year. So let's say you submit an advance payment request for this quarter. We would not be able to do another advance payment request for Q4 2025 until we have evidence that the funds advanced in this quarter were fully spent down. And evidence can look like receipts, paid invoices showing a $0 balance due, paid checks. The evidence that we're looking for, we can take a look at those on it, like I said, on a case-by-case basis, and we'll let you know if there's anything further that we need to close out that prior request. So as I said, a new advance can be requested once evidence is provided confirming the prior advance has been spent in full. Moving on. So we'll go through timelines real quick. First, as I said, the acquisition closing invoice timeline looks a little bit different from the others. So we ask for 30 to 45 days prior to close. You, the grantee, gives our team a heads up that there's a property closing coming in 30 to 45 days. During that initial time frame, you, the grantee, will prepare the reimbursement invoice form with all the details of the acquisition and closing, specifically the purchase price and any fees associated with it, such as the title fees, insurance, taxes, the things that usually go with purchasing a property. We will also see all that broken down on the estimated closing estimated settlement statement, excuse me, that we will get from the title company, as well as the wire instructions. And then at 15 to 25 days before closing, you'll submit that form to us with all the other documentation requested. We'll review. We'll get it submitted to the Office of Fiscal Services, who will handle the wire part of it. And as we get to the closing date, we'll work closely with title to make sure we have everything as solidified as possible in terms of the fees and ensuring that we have the correct wire instructions. So when we get to closing date, we'll finalize the property closing with title. We'll also execute and record a declaration of restrictive covenant against the title of the property. That'll ensure that, you know, our use restriction is memorialized on the title of the property, and the wire will be sent to title to finalize closing. Next is our timeline for the reimbursement invoice or advance payment request. So you'll see this when we go through the form, but when you select the time frame, the form auto-generates a due date. And so 15 days before the invoice due date, you'll begin preparing the estimated, you'll begin preparing the form with your expenditures from that month, or you'll begin preparing with your estimated quarterly expenditures, and you'll gather your supporting documentation. Then by the due date, which is the 15th of the month that you're submitting in, you'll complete the form, submit everything to us with the documentation required. Our team will begin review. That whole process of reviewing and getting it to the Office of Fiscal Services for payment is what will take up that remaining 30 days. So 45 days after receipt of that completed request, it'll be approved. Payment will be remitted from the Office of Fiscal Services. And just for a bit of context, that review process, there's 3 levels of review. Every level of review takes about 2 to 3 days on average. So total time for review and getting to Office of Fiscal Services is usually about the 6 to 10. But again, we reserve 45 days, and our averages are well within that timeline. Now we'll go through just a real quick introduction of what each tab of the form looks like. You'll have your instructions tab. It provides the grant program objectives, your eligible program activities, which these are all spelled out in the grant agreement as well, but they cover the same exact topics and verbiage, so that way there's no confusion here. And then there's also a little breakdown of the invoicing process information. One thing I wanted to note, though, we will be sending out a brand new invoicing form here, I believe right after this meeting. And it will show at the very bottom of that first tab, updated January 23, 2025. That is how you'll know you have the most current form, and that is the form that we ask that you save on your desktops and use going forward. Any other prior versions you have, delete them. Please do not use them, because unfortunately, if we receive those, we'll have to send it back to you and ask, hey, please put this on the newer form. The first tab is the one that you'll actually be working in. The blue cells are the only ones that you will have to worry about. The gray cells auto-populate with the information that you're going to put in here. And when we get to the end of this, I'll do a live demo of our form and show you how this all works. But as I said, the blue cells are the only ones you need to worry about. The gray ones auto-populate based on what you put in here. And this is the second half of that first tab, breaking down the startup costs. Same thing here. You'll put in your info in the blue cells. And again, all the gray ones will auto-populate. The second tab is where you put your expenditure details, the breakdown of your expenditures. Only the blue cells, again, will be usable. The budget category and budget subcategory are both drop-down menus, so you'll pick from what's available in there. The invoice date is going to be the actual date that is on the invoice documentation you're providing, not the paid date, not the due date, not some other third date, the date that is on the invoice paperwork itself. You'll provide the company or vendor name, an invoice number if one's available. If it's not an invoice and it's a receipt, provide the transaction or receipt number, the final amount that you're requesting reimbursement from. We have instances where perhaps the receipt or invoice is for more than what you're actually requesting. That's fine. Uh, just provide a little bit of detail here in the expense description in relation to program objectives, so we have some narrative to follow along with and be able to um, point to and say this is why we reimbursed less than what the actual invoice amount shows. And then thirdly is the certification tab. This is the final tab. This is where you'll certify that everything is true and accurate on the form. An authorized agent of your organization will need to put their name in here, their title, and the date. You'll see the note here at the bottom, but your the name, what you type in there is your authorized digital signature. There's no need to print this out or wet sign it. There's no need to go through those extra steps. Simply typing your name in there is more than sufficient for us. And we ask that the date you're certifying be the date that you actually sign it, not the date that you're submitting or not the date that you prepared it. Unless those are all the same date, then that's perfectly fine. So now we will do a quick walkthrough of one of these forms so we can show you how it all kind of works after I close out of this. There we go. Okay. Layla, is that looking okay on your guys' end?
I can see the Excel document.
Perfect. So as I'd said in the slides, your first tab has your instructions breaking down everything you need to know about the program itself, your program activities, the process for invoicing, how the form works. Gives you a little bit more context on the blue or gray cells and some invoice information in terms of, what is this data field for? What do you need to do with it? And then, as I said on the very bottom, well, look at that. I'm using the wrong one. Apologies.
Well, we've got a minute. It looks like Vesna was able to jump on. Vesna, do you want to say
Thank
hello to
you,
the
Vesna.
partners?
Yes, hello everybody. I apologize for being late. There's a legislative session going on and that meeting took precedent. I apologize, but I am here. I am a program analyst and a first level of review for the invoices that are being sent. And probably you're getting an email from me saying I need the receipt or I need a signature or something like that. So thank you and welcome to the session and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Vesna. And that is perfect timing because my most latest form should be opening up right this second. As soon as Excel decides to cooperate. There we go. Okay.
See the PowerPoint.
There we
Yeah,
go.
there we go.
So as I said, it'll say updated January 23, 2025 at the bottom of it. So now to the invoice form. As I'd said, the blue cells are the only ones that you need to worry about, and the grant agreement number is where you're going to start. It has a drop down that has all of our grant agreements within it. And these will auto-populate with the pertinent details of your grant agreement number. I believe I saw we had a Restoration House join the session. Bradford, if that is the case, I am going to use your guys' grant agreement as an example. Which, unfortunately, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I will find it for you here in just a second. 80359. And You may notice there does not appear to be a rhyme or reason as to what the order is of the numbers are. Uh, it it's in order of, I want to say, part name alphabetically. So I understand that is, well, that's not the right one. I understand that may not be terribly helpful, but I apologize there. I'm pulling up the wrong one. Oh, Restoration Houses. We'll find it. There it is. All right. So as you saw, selecting different grant numbers brings in different organization, project, contact, name, info, and county. This is all based on what we have on record. So if anything changes, please let us know. We'll update it in our side. And you may not see the change reflected on the form until there's a definitive change that requires sending out a new form to all partners. That being said, when there are changes, please let us know so we can update our records. So yeah, you'll select your grant number from the drop-down. You'll enter who's preparing it. Since I'm preparing it, I'll put my name in there, and we'll do today as the date of report. As I said, don't worry about the gray cells. They are either locked down and protected, so there's nothing you can do with them, or they're for our purposes, such as OHA reviewed by. Oh, that's interesting. Seems this cell does not want to work. Okay. We'll take a closer look at that. But for purposes of today, we'll go through our form all the same. So first, you're going to pick what kind of request this is. If it's a reimbursement for a prior month, or if it's a acquisition, you'll choose reimbursement invoice, and then you'll choose the time period that you're submitting for. You'll see acquisition and closing invoice is the first one at the top. And then we have all months going through, I want to say next March. Yeah. If any reimbursement is being requested for a time frame prior to what is listed here, we just ask that you use the most recent one available. So if you're trying to submit for August or September, you'll use November. But for this one, we'll select January. And so, for example, let's say we're requesting $100,000 in renovation or construction costs to be reimbursed. You'll see that at first this gray cell turns red. That is because there is no corresponding expenditure on the second tab. And once you fill in a corresponding expenditure that matches this subcategory and budget category that matches this cost, the red cell will then turn gray. And this is going to be your totals for that category. So if you have multiple vendors or multiple invoices that total up to 100,000, you'll break them out on the expenditure details. Here we ask for just a little bit of detail if you can. Let's just say foundation and framing. And for illustrative purposes, we'll also put $500 in utilities. Again, you'll see this cell turns red, and you could add a little detail in there, water bill. And you'll see it does all the math for you down here at the bottom. That's why we ask, please don't touch the gray cells, because they'll do all the math for you. When you're done filling in this tab, you'll go to your expenditure details, and this is where you'll provide the breakdown of those expenses. So we had a development cost, which was renovation and construction. We could say it was for the 12th, and it was for ABC contracting. Invoice numbers 1, 2, 3. So we had one invoice for, say, 50,000, and it was for foundation. We'll go back to the invoice form just so you can see it captures that 50,000 from the second tab, but it's still red because we're not totaling 100,000. So this is where you'll make sure you enter all of your categories and subcategories. We'll add that other renovation and construction cost. Oops. And this vendor is DEF Contracting. And wouldn't you know it, their invoice number is 456. And we'll say it's another $50,000. And that one was for framing. And now we have no reds. That's how we know that it did the math. Everything lines up. We're good. We still have a red cell here from the utilities, so we got to make sure, oh, yep, we put that budget category in there. We'll check the drop down for startup costs since utilities is a startup cost. And it was City of Salem. And their number is 789. So it was a $500 water bill. Water was expensive that month. And now we have no red cells because it found the cost, it lined up. It's the same exact amount. Everything is copacetic down here. Once we've entered all of our expenditures, everything lines up. We've got all our details in here as to what exactly it was for and how it related. You'll provide your certification. As I said, simply typing in your name is good enough. You'll use your title and the date that you are certifying. And that's truly it. You'll want to save it to your own desktop. That way you have record of it. I recommend keeping it simple. You know, HB5024 reimbursement, January 2025. Not here to tell you how to keep records. Do please note though, at any point we may reach out to you for more information on prior invoices, simply because taxpayer dollars have a lot of oversight on them, and if there's ever an audit, we may reach out to you for further information. So we ask that you keep record as well as us. We're going to keep record too. So that is kind of the end of the live walkthrough, and I think we can open it up for questions.
Hello, this is Brandon with Sequoia.
Oh, hey, Brandon. I am so sorry. I got your short name mixed up with another one.
Oh,
it shows up as B-Belt on my side, and I'm very sorry. It's very similar to Restoration House's representative who I talked to.
Well, that's totally fine. It's kind of, I've got kind of a weird setup for Zoom.
No worries.
So, yeah, sorry I haven't gotten the final invoice to you for that. It's been 2 months, but I've been slammed, and I guess watching this webinar, you're not asking for any like backup documentation on any of this stuff, or is that what I understand?
No, we totally are. I just don't have any backup
are.
documentation for myself to use as an example.
Okay. All
but
right.
yeah, so when you do submit these in, to go along with all of these expenses, say you do have, you know, a $50,000 invoice from ABC Contracting. They probably have an invoice or an estimate for you that says, hey, you owe us 50,000 by 15 days after receipt or something along those lines, right?
Right.
That's what we're looking for. An invoice that clearly notes who the vendor is, the date. If it has an address for where work is completed, great. That's super helpful for us because we have partners who have multiple projects going on at once. And so occasionally we'll get invoices that maybe aren't for the correct project, but are for another project. So if your contractor is able to, as much detail on the invoice as possible. Like I said, date of the invoice, vendor name, the work that was actually done, and if they have a place to put where the work was performed, the work, you know, work address, site address, what have you.
Yeah.
Please, we'd love to see that on there. It helps make things it helps make things easier for us.
Yeah. So anything that we have on this page for expenditure details, you need to see a backup copy
Some
of
form of
anything we
backup.
put
Yep.
on there.
Invoice.
Okay, well
If it's an advance request, an estimate is totally fine, or a contract,
yeah.
or a
Well, no,
contract from your contractor.
yeah, yeah. Our site is up and running, so I just need to collect. It's just a matter of collecting everything, and
Sure.
basically, it's like dozens or possibly hundreds of invoices that I would need to collect and scan, which is kind of why I've been putting it off. It's got to be probably at least a day or two time commitment for me to do that.
Understood.
And
Understood.
we've been going through our audit. We just are getting it signed off now, so that's out of the way. So kind of clearing the decks. I'm hoping to make this a project that I can get off to you guys within the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
Just to let you know where we're at. I know we've been in communication.
Yeah, and really that's what the key is here is communication. If you're having difficulties,
Yeah.
or if you're coming up with, you're getting invoices or estimates that you're not 100% sure if they're going to work, let us know. Reach out to us. We're here to help. I want to know what's going on, because if I don't know what the problem is, I can't help you with it, and I'd love to be helpful.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's only hurting us because we've expended these funds and we just need reimbursement for them.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
yeah.
Do your best to make sure it's as, clear and concise as possible. I understand, you got a lot of expenses to go through and figure out what goes with which. But, we're human, we make errors, and all we can do is try our best to reduce those.
Okay. And I see in the chat, Blanca said first 2 months of operations we can bill for. Is that kind of just, is that something we can all do, or?
Yeah, so part of the grant dollars, part of your grant agreement, if you budgeted for it, you will be able to, receive reimbursement for the first 2 months of operations, whether it's, first 2 months of salaries, or your initial startup costs for having to purchase furniture, utilities. The invoice form breaks it out, the categories that we have here. You'll have, if you purchased a vehicle or specialized equipment, appliances, etc. Just keep in mind.
I'll need to review that.
Yeah. Well, just keep in mind, the 2 month restriction is to ensure that, the grant dollars aren't going towards ongoing operations, because that, to put it bluntly, is not the intent of the grant dollars.
Right.
And that, but they're here for startup to help kind of bridge that gap between, okay, our doors are open, to we have clients, we have people we're serving, and we're getting service dollars for those. That's kind of the bridge there, is the startup cost within the grant.
Okay. All right.
Anything else?
I think that's about it for me. Just okay. I was just wondering to what extent we needed to supply backup documentation, but I guess it's for the whole amount, which I say it's gonna take me a while to compile, but I should be able to get started on that here probably next week, I would imagine. So
understood.
Yeah, I'll be in communication with you guys.
Okay.
Thanks for doing this.
For sure, Brandon. We appreciate you being here. I think I saw we had another question.
Actually, it was me, John, if that's okay. And thank you, Brandon, for mentioning that, because I was gonna say, make sure that we can open those scans, like if you don't mind scanning them in PDF, so we can actually open and attach and work on it. That would be great, because sometimes if we can't open them, we can't work on them, right? And that then would create more back and forth between us. And another thing that I was going to say is if you can send 1 month at a time, so that would be great, because when you send the invoice, it's going to go through at least 3 levels of review, and having 1 email at a time per month for that invoice would be nice, because then we don't have to separate different months and different emails, and of course for accountability and tracking, right? Does that make sense, Brandon?
Well, I was gonna send PDFs So you
That's
want
good.
them delineated by month or
Right. So, for example, if you send a January invoice for 25, send only the PDF receipts for the January 25. So, for
oh,
example, don't send one email with January, February, March, April, and May, uh, because that creates then a lot of confusion on our side, because again, every month goes through its own um, email tracking
oh,
through level
okay,
1, 2, and 3, right? So my
right.
point is, if you can just say send one email with one form for January and the receipts and invoices for January and send it on, then send another email for February and so on, right? Because I would be forwarding that email through at least 3 levels of review.
Well, our project is completed. So do I just
Oh,
send you the whole thing?
well,
Yeah.
well,
So
John will be the guidance on when your project is completed, but when it's not, 1 month at a time instead of 1 year at a time would be nice. And I was going to ask John if you don't mind maybe explaining the difference between when a receipt is needed versus an estimate. Um,
yeah,
so that,
I did
yeah,
cover it
thank
earlier,
you.
but
Oh, you
just
did?
again to
Oh, okay.
repeat,
Thanks.
receipts are perfectly acceptable for invoice reimbursement and invoices as well. An invoice is essentially a cost incurred but not yet paid. A cost incurred for us is sufficient for reimbursement because when it comes to capital development and real estate, if you have somebody come out to the property and do work, they are entitled legally to place a lien on the property if you don't pay it. And so the invoice is their notice. Well, the invoice is obviously the paperwork showing how much is owed. Uh, Working with contractors, Brandon, I'm sure you've gotten plenty of notice of right to lien. That's essentially what we're trying to avoid here is any liens being placed on the property for non-payment. So an invoice showing cost incurred is perfectly fine. Now, in respect to what you're possibly going to be doing here soon, Brandon, and submitting everything for prior months, uh, for ease, I would suggest trying to fit it all onto one reimbursement request form. Understanding, of course, that you may have a lot more than what's actually available here. I think we have 57 line items, 49 lines. I believe you can insert a cell in here that will, you know what? I don't think you can. Okay. Well, Brandon, let me think on this a little bit and get back to you on the best way to handle it because I don't want to give you bad information and have it gum up the process. All right.
Okay. Okay.
But we'll figure out how to best support you in this. Did I see one more question? I thought I saw another hand up, but then it looks like
Yeah,
it went back down.
Summer has their hand up.
Yes, Summer Watkins, Columbia Community Mental Health.
Hey, Summer.
My questions are very odd. One of them is registered agent, or I mean, authorized
Mhm.
agent can be anyone in the organization that happens to be sending this out, or does it need to be a specific title?
It doesn't need to be anybody specific. It just needs to be somebody within your organization that your organization appointed to either do this stuff or you authorize them to do it. We're not here to tell you how to run your organization. As long as the person who's sending this in is authorized within your org, we're okay.
Perfect. And then, for example, if I just finished a January 15th report and I submitted on the 15th for December, and then on the 16th, I receive additional December invoice that didn't get to us. Do you want me to revise the report that was sent on January 3rd or 15th? Do you want me to do a version 2, a second one that has just the one invoice, or is it acceptable to add it to the one that I'm submitting in February?
You could add it to the one in February. That way
Okay.
we can avoid pulling back things that may already be in process and extending the timeline on that one.
Okay.
And making changes mid-month can sometimes cause processing issues that I really like to try and avoid. If you can hang on to it till the next month, please do.
Okay.
It's easier for us, and I like to think it might be easier for you too. If it's not, tell me and we can try and revise the process.
Perfect. Thank you very much. That's all I had.
Beautiful. Anything else we can cover or any other questions we can answer? All right. Well, seeing none, again, I want to thank everybody for being here. I appreciate you taking the time to listen in and bring great questions. Um, this, like I said, or like Layla said, is being recorded. Uh, Blanca, did I miss something? Maybe. Yes, no.
Sorry, I
Uh,
wasn't able to unmute myself. And so the only thing I would like for you to cover is if you could talk a little bit about what type of things would result in us sending the
oh,
invoice
thank
back
you.
to
Thank you.
the grant recipient
Yep.
for further follow-up or clarification.
Yep. So there may be circumstances or occurrences where we have to send something back. Top reason why we usually send something back is simply the wrong form was submitted. An old version of it was used, and we, have since updated it, which means we need to go back and have everything that was submitted put on the newest form. That's why I ask when this goes out, which it should go out, I would say at the end of this meeting, with the recording. Please save it to your desktop. Make it clear that this is the newest one. Make it clear that this is the one you need to use. And, going forward, just be on the lookout for any updates to it. We try to avoid sending out an updated form for minimal changes, but if there's something, uh, you know, dramatic that needs to be changed, then yeah, we will send out a new form to all partners so that way there is no confusion. Other reasons things get sent back, mismatched invoices that don't correlate with what is being requested, or invoices that just don't provide the information that confirms what's being requested. We understand like if you go to say Lowe's, Home Depot, Target, wherever, you're not going to get a ton of info on those receipts. You're just going to get whatever it is you purchased and the date. That's fine. What we ask for is, provide as much detail as you can in the expenditure details of how that receipt correlates specifically with the program. I understand it's a limited space. Do your best with what you have. And, if you feel a little commentary might help, provide some commentary, whether it's in a Word document or what have you. Explaining it in your email is perfectly fine. Just something to be aware of. What we're doing here is, it's all publicly visible. So I'd say keep that in mind and make sure that you're being as descriptive as possible. Trying to think of other reasons why things might get sent back. Uh, Usually it's like I said, the wrong form or just missing documentation or incomplete documentation. Occasionally there's also just simply the fact of we can't open what was sent. We have the technology that we have, and unfortunately that means that it's not always going to be compatible with what your organization may be using. Best Your best practices are going to be provide PDFs, uh, and try to avoid using a zip file if you can. Zip files just kind of make things a little more complicated for us. If it's the only way to send it via email, then it is what it is, and we'll work with it as best as we can. Um, but yeah, the only other request I have again is just try to keep everything separate, one document per page, or one receipt or one invoice per page. Um, and yeah, you know, and if you got questions on any of those, if you have something that you're not 100% sure if it's going to work for us, please reach out. Let us know. I'm happy to answer questions and let you know if I think it's going to work or not. That's my job here as grant administrators to try and be collaborative and cooperative to try and get this figured out for us. Try to assist in the process as best as I can, and you know, uh, learn lessons of when mistakes are made. that's all we can try to do here. But if there are no other questions, Blanca, was there anything else you
No,
brought up?
you've done a fabulous job. Thank you, Behavioral Health Investment Team.
Well, I don't need a recorded praise, but thank you.
I